We're here. So hello, everybody. I apologize that we're a little late. I'm sure you will not be surprised to know that Kendrick had technology issues, even though I started 10 minutes early trying to fix this problem. It's the way it goes. But I am so excited to be here with you today for part of our continuing education. It's one of the things that I think makes being an alumni so special is that you could get education well beyond sales school to help you run a business that makes money and impacts the people that you are meant to help. I am beyond excited to have Chris Belfi with us today. Chris is a sales school alum, just like you. And I will tell you that Chris's brain works the exact opposite of the way my brain works. So he's super organized. He's on top of everything. Every I is always dotted. Every T is always crossed. And it is a fantastic thing. The results that Chris is able to get for his clients are really some of the best that I've seen in the industry. Chris, you sent me a bio and I'm just sort of going off and gushing all over you instead of reading the bio, but he just helps his clients take control of their lives and gets rid of the mess and the stress and if you've got 5 million things to do, he cuts that down to very few things you need to do. It is an amazing skill set that he has. But today he's here to talk to you about taxes. And what I will tell you about taxes is if you're not paying attention to this area of your business, it will come back and kick you in the rear at some point. I don't care if you are making $0 or if you're making $1 million. This is one of the most important things you can do as a business owner. I have seen it destroy businesses. I'm not kidding. I've seen it bankrupt businesses. And I'll make some confessions here as Chris gets started. I've experienced the wrath of not taking this seriously before. So Chris, welcome to the Alumni Lounge. You're a regular here, obviously, but thank you for being willing to share your genius with us.
Well, thank you, Kendrick. That's quite an introduction.
Yeah, I mean, are you surprised that it was completely off script?
Oh, no, not at all. You are very good at improvising, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell us, Chris, we're going to talk about how to have a stress-free tax season, right?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I know everybody's busy, and so hopefully the goal here is really for me to give you some ideas and some things you can do that will make your life easier, and we'll do that in a relatively short amount of time and make good value for your time, right? So I appreciate you trusting me with your time. We're going to try and do that as efficiently and effectively as possible, right?
I have no doubt it'll be efficient and effective. You are in charge. You are large and in charge, Chris.
So today we're going to learn how to, number one, beat procrastination and actually get started pulling your tax information together. And really this applies not just to your business taxes, but to any taxes you have to deal with that have anything more than, a couple of boxes to fill out, right? So we're going to beat procrastination. And number two, we're going to teach you how to set yourself up to make progress on your tax data in just like 10 minutes a day without getting overwhelmed. And then number three, I'm going to talk about how to keep yourself going so you can actually finish getting your tax data together early and avoid the stress of that last minute rush, because nobody wants to do the last minute rush, and yet so many people do the last minute rush, right, Kendrick?
Yes, Chris.
Yes.
I'm actually taking notes. Just
good.
I think this is again so valuable. But yep, absolutely. So many people wait till the last minute.
Yes.
It's dreadful when you do that.
It is. So, so first let's just talk about, procrastination and just a little bit about why do people procrastinate about their taxes? Because honestly, I'm sure that a lot of people out there procrastinate about their taxes. That's almost like one of the top things people probably procrastinate about on a year-to-year basis, I would guess. And so, why is that? What causes people to procrastinate about taxes? And I think there's really two things that come together that make taxes one of those things that people put off and put off and put off. Number one is it's a complicated process. It's not super simple, especially if you're in the United States. And I'm guessing most of the people tuning in are from the United States here. And so it's a complicated process. So it creates, this uncertainty around, am I going to do it right? And number two, it actually has bad consequences if you get it wrong. right? So it's not just some kind of complicated thing that, you know, you get it right, you get it wrong, doesn't really matter. You know, you get it wrong, you could have, you know, phone calls and unhelpful letters from the IRS. And that creates a lot of stress for people just thinking about doing their taxes. So they start with the idea of, oh, I need to start my taxes. And they very quickly jump to, and if I get it wrong, I'm going to be in big trouble and I might go to jail. And so that kind of psychological process naturally pushes people towards procrastination. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yes.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
so the good news is that if you have a really solid process or approach for getting ready for taxes, and I talk about mainly getting ready for taxes because I use a professional tax preparer, and even if you just use a software, or even if you're doing it yourself, you know, the first step is to get everything together. And I do recommend, generally speaking, that because taxes are complicated, that it's great to have some kind of outside help to do those. But this is applicable even if you're going to do everything yourself. So if you have this solid process, though, you can avoid a lot of the stress and overwhelm and actually get rid of that procrastination when it comes to getting into tax season. And so today, you know, I'm just going to walk you through the exact steps that I use based on productivity principles to, you know, beat procrastination and reduce that stress and that overwhelm that sometimes happens during tax season. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, one of the things I will say, Chris, and I want to, I may have some questions throughout this, but one of the things I'll say is, you talked about why people procrastinate. If I'm being super honest, one of the reasons I procrastinate, or at least in the beginning, was I was kind of afraid of the numbers. I mean, I wouldn't admit that back then, but I was afraid to see how much I had spent. Really, I was. That sounds so, like, I'm almost embarrassed to say it because it sounds really unintelligent. Like, you're afraid of the numbers are what they are, but I was afraid to see, oh my gosh, I spent 6 figures on learning and I made nothing, or, you know, or I made all this money, but then I spent triple that, or, and I was almost afraid to look at it. I was very scared. And so what I found is scared sort of precedes procrastination, right?
Absolutely.
Like you come up with all the reasons you're too busy to do it, and you believe it. But really at the root, it's fear.
Yes, absolutely. You're afraid of some kind of outcome, whether it's the IRS phone call or just looking at numbers that make you very unhappy, right?
Yeah. So absolutely. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you, but
you're probably not going to have a lot of procrastination around things that have absolutely no negative kind of emotions, at least potentially attached to them, I'm guessing, for most people. Yep.
Yeah, makes sense.
So let's get started. And the first thing we're going to talk about is beating procrastination, right? And so one of the key strategies to beating procrastination in anything is to start small. So what I want you to think about it as the first step to getting ready for taxes is just to create a checklist of all that information and documents that you need to get your taxes done. You know, nothing about actually doing taxes, nothing about, you know, even looking for documents or information. Just create a list of what you need, okay?
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you again.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm not going to do this the whole time.
No, I think this is going to make it much more informative to have you asking questions along the way.
So one of the things that this applies even if you're not doing taxes, which Chris said, this applies to procrastination, but Chris and I had a bonus sales school session at the end of last year sometime, and he taught me this tip about making checklists. I don't know if you remember or not, Chris.
I do remember that, yes.
And so one of the things that we're doing this year with sales school is, and I'm super proud, we're dotting every I, we're crossing every T, we're checking it, and then we're checking it again. And it all started with this list, Chris. This is my checklist for sales school. Actually, this whole notebook is full of my checklist for sales school. But it's fantastic because not only, and this came straight from you. Not only do I have, for example, affiliate sign up, thank you. I have the day it was done, 3/12/18. I have the date that it was checked by me, and then I'll have the date that it was checked by my team and the date it was sent. So this works in your business as well when you have those projects that are just getting too big, and the more successful you are, like for example, sales school grows and grows and grows, and you're like, oh my God, we're dropping balls. And how are we dropping balls? Because we kick ass. And so I'm excited to see what sales school looks like this year, just because I followed this one principle that you taught me. And I have this beautiful puppy dog sales.
That is fantastic. That will improve any process, is having a cute notebook to go with it.
Exactly. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that this is something that I learned from you. It's so simple, and it's already proving very effective. Like, we're so much further along with sales school this year than we have been before.
Great. Yeah. And I just want to point out that checklists are especially helpful for anything that happens more than once, right?
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. And so, you can plan anything and you have something that looks like a checklist, but if it's repeating, then that's where you want to have a checklist that every time you go through it, you're actually improving that checklist. And so every time you do it, you should be a little more on top of things.
Sounds fantastic.
And so, with taxes being, once a year, or even in some cases with quarterly sorts of processes once a quarter, this is a process where having that checklist is just going to pay dividends over and over again, because you're going to be able to, number one, reuse it, and number two, actually improve it every time.
Yeah, it makes so much sense, and it's so easy.
Yeah. And so creating a checklist is the first step, but I want to actually break that down for you even further, because with procrastination, we want to break stuff down as far as possible so that it is easy as possible to get started into action, because usually if we get started, that's where we break through the procrastination. Okay? And so how you start creating this checklist kind of depends on your own situation. So let me give you a couple of possibilities. Number one is, for me, my first step is always find the information organizer, which is for me an Excel spreadsheet. Find the one I did last year, open it up, and delete everything, delete all the specific numbers that I put in last year. And so now I have a fresh one to start my new tax process.
So what kind of information organizer, tell me what information organizer means. What type of, what does that mean exactly?
So for me, I actually have an Excel workbook where I have things like the numbers around, some of the 1099s or the deductions like mortgage interest or property taxes. So I actually have all those numbers kind of pulled together in one Excel workbook. And so those numbers, from last year aren't really relevant, but if I just blank out the numbers, then I've got the sort of the form, so to speak, my information gathering form that then I can start reusing. So
what if, and I may be putting the cart before the horse here, so just, correct me.
So you're probably about to ask me about some of the other options if you don't have one of those.
How do you get started with that? How do you know? And I realize that you're not our accountant, so I want to.
No problem at all.
How do you figure out what to put in there?
Exactly. So if you don't have that already, then here's another option. One is you can ask your tax preparer, because they probably have a checklist or an actual data organizer for you. Now, if you don't happen to have a CPA or an enrolled agent tax preparer that you already use, and you're say using TurboTax or you're doing it yourself, then another option is go to the web and search for income tax checklist, and it will pop up with multiple options from people probably like TurboTax and other, I think they're actually probably accounting firms that publish there just on their website as part of what they put on their website. So there's different ways to get a hold of that, right?
Yeah, and this saves you money too. So this is so interesting. I did this yesterday with our CFO, bookkeeper and CFO, and I said, you know what, are we missing any deductions? And he pulled up a checklist, and he said and it was, it was long, all the things that you could deduct.
Sure.
Business.
Yeah.
And he was like, we're deducting this, and we found a deduction that we weren't taking. I mean, and so that saves you money. It saves you money that you have
Absolutely.
to pay. This, you want to make more money? Save yourself money by the amount of, we're all going to pay taxes. I get it, but don't pay taxes if you don't have to do this.
That's right. And that's part of your tax preparer's job, honestly, is to help you identify all those different deductions, which is one of the reasons why I want a professional doing my taxes, because U.S. taxes are honestly very complicated.
Ridiculous.
So yes, it saves you money. And then one other idea is, again, we're trying to break this down to as simple as possible. So it could be as simple as go to the web and search for a checklist. It could be as simple as call your tax preparer. It could be as simple as pull out last year's return and the data and the documents with it and just look through it. And as you look through it, you can build that checklist. Even if you didn't have somebody to give you a checklist, and probably you're better off just finding a checklist. But if you didn't even have that, just go through last year's return and start figuring out all the different pieces you had to pull together last year.
Makes sense. Yep.
So any of those could be the first starting point. And again, these are really concrete, specific actions. And we call this next action thinking, which is getting it down to something very concrete, specific, and visible that you do that honestly doesn't require, if you write that down, it doesn't require extra thinking to figure out what does that mean? How do I do it? You know? And so that's what we want to get down to, because that's the level of thinking that helps us break through procrastination. And in the vein of saving money, depending on how, say you're using a professional tax preparer, depending on how they work and how they bill, having all your information really well organized can save you money from their bill. Because if they take less time, some of them, depending on, depends on how they structure their pricing, but some of them, the less time they take to do your taxes, the less you pay to for their fees. So it's great to be organized just for that reason. And so realize, in terms of procrastination, you don't need to, quote, do your taxes. You just need to get started in this checklist. That's all you have to do to get started on your taxes. And that's how you need to think about it, because do your taxes is honestly really large, vague, and a little intimidating at times. So that's the first step to beating procrastination. That's the first step of beating procrastination is, get that checklist in place and, figure out what that very first step is to get that checklist started.
Yeah. And I want to say something to this too. So for anybody out there who's thinking, oh, taxes, oh, more accounting, oh, another spreadsheet. I'm gonna give you a little dose of reality that may sound sweet as pie because of my accent, but it's tough as nails. If this is how you feel, then you don't need to run a business. Like, this is part of running a business. U.S. News and World Report says that the #1 reason small businesses fail is because the numbers don't add up. I am telling you right now that the numbers don't add up because people don't do this. By the way, I hate doing this. It's my least favorite part of running a business. It's why I pay to have people help me do it, but there's still things I have to do. I have to have a monthly meeting. But if you don't want to do this is like I want to have a beach body, but I don't want to exercise. I want to lay on the couch and eat bonbons all day. Well, great, that's your choice. But you're probably not going to have a beach body by laying around eating bonbons all day. You're not going to have a business that makes money and helps people if you procrastinate and put this off and never do it. It will bite you in the ass. I don't know any other way to say it. So it's time to man up or woman up or whatever is politically correct to say these days, and do this. Do this if you want to run a business that has an impact and makes money. And I know you do, or you wouldn't be here. Okay, I'm off my high horse now.
Great. Thank you, Kendrick. I do want to just mention that, assuming that there are a few people watching live, that it would be great to have any questions in the comments, and we will try to get to those, assuming we have the time to do that. I don't think this is going to take a full hour. So, assuming
Kendrick quits interrupting.
Well, Kendrick is adding the kind of color that we need to make sure this is extremely exciting.
Okay, Chris, take it away.
Okay, so that's the key to getting started. And so once you have this checklist, then we're going to move on to step number 2. Now we can see, well, actually, just want to comment about the checklist. When you have this checklist, whether it's 1 page or 5 pages, you now have drawn a line around what it takes to get your taxes done, so to speak. You've figured out that there is a limit to all the different things you need to pull together. And it may be big and it may be small, but the point is, you know what it looks like. It's not just a vague idea that it's really difficult. You've sort of put a level of concreteness to it that makes it much less emotionally intimidating or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And so, the good news is that even if it's 5 pages long, it's not 10 pages long, right? So that's that first step. Get that checklist done. And so now what do we do next? So we have a checklist. So now we got to set ourselves up to make progress consistently in fairly small amounts of time. I would say, 10 minutes, about 10 minutes a day. Honestly, if it was the beginning of March, I'd say definitely 10 minutes a day. Now that we're at the end of March, and if you have an April 15th deadline, you might need more than 10 minutes a day just because we have less time. So here's what you need to do though. So as you go through that list of every piece of information or every document that needs to be pulled together to get your taxes done, you need to identify what very specific physical action needs to happen to move towards checking that item off. So if it's a number, well, how are you going to find that number? And what's the first step to finding that number? Now, good news is that you may have already collected a bunch of this stuff and you just need to slot it in. But if you haven't, then, figure out, well, what is the very first step? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it go to a certain account on your web bank account, log in and find this number, or download this form like a 1099 INT from your bank. And so for every single item on that checklist, if it's not done yet, you got to figure out what is the very next bite-sized step that will move you towards getting finished.
Hey, can I add one thing here?
Sure.
One of the things that I do, I can't believe I have actual value to add to this organization procrastination conversation, but I do. One of the things I do is, you'll get things in the mail starting in January, like
Sure.
My husband's W-2 or interest that we paid on our house or whatever. You get those things in the mail. I have a red folder in my desk. And it says taxes on it, and every one of those things just goes in there. And
absolutely
nothing else goes in there. And so when it's time for taxes, literally all I have to do is pull those things out, and they're all there. And it makes it so easy. I used to not do that. And I was always scrambling and trying to go to the web and pull them up. And that red folder is I don't think about it until February comes or January, and I start dropping those things in, and it's fantastic.
Absolutely. And so that's one great principle, is one place. So one folder, your red folder, whatever it is for the physical mail, one computer folder where you store all the electronic documents, and possibly one email folder if you have email items that relate to taxes. But you just want one spot of each of those kinds where you put all that stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is a great practice to keep your taxes under control. And so, as we were saying, what one thing you would do, Kendrick, is once you had that checklist, is you would go through your folder and just start checking stuff off.
Exactly.
Okay, got this. Oh, I don't have this. Where is it? Or did it not even show up? And if it didn't show up, then who do I call or who do I email? And once you have that one action, then you just need one action against everything that's not checked off yet. And again, we want them super specific, super concrete, so it's really obvious what to do when you're not super energized and you're not super you don't have a lot of time, but you just know that you can just get it done with relatively low amount of time and energy. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
And so if you put an action on there that feels kind of big, then you really want to think about, can you break it down further, because it's likely that it hasn't been broken down to the point where it should be. But a lot of these are just going to be, email this person, call this person, go to that bank website and find that form. And then some of those things are just going to be labeled waiting for, because it may be early, depending on what time it is in the process, it may be too early. Because if you do this process in January, there may be a lot of things that you're just waiting for because they're going to come in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So you just label them waiting for, and we'll get to how you handle that later. But then you just know, okay, that one I'm waiting for. Maybe I just sent somebody an email and now I'm waiting for them to get back to me. Okay, that's fine. As long as I know that I'm waiting, and I know who I'm waiting for, then there's no problem. And so once you have a single, very specific action against every item on that list that hasn't been checked off yet, then it's really easy to make progress in just 10 minutes a day. You pull it up, you find something, find 2 or 3 things, 10, 15 minutes, you've knocked off 2 or 3 of those actions that move those things forward. And then you can come, if you only want to spend 10 minutes, you come back the next day and put another 10 minutes in. And it doesn't have to be a big thing of spending the whole weekend doing your taxes. Of course, you wait till April 14th that it may be a big thing where you spend the whole weekend doing your taxes.
Yeah.
But we want to avoid that, right?
It's interesting. I heard Martha Beck talk about this exact same principle when she was writing her dissertation, I believe, at Harvard, or one of her dissertations. She said, it physically made me sick to think about it being so overwhelming. I believe those are the words she used, maybe not, but she didn't want to do it.
It could. My wife did a dissertation.
And so, And so she said she broke it down. And one day, all she could do was get the phone number of somebody she needed to call. She had a big checklist. I got the phone number. That's all I did that day. The next day I made the call. I left a message. The next day the person called me back and I got my question. Literally broke it down into such baby steps that it wasn't near as overwhelming or near as, I don't think it physically made her sick. That's probably a Kendrick saying, but didn't cause her the stress that it initially caused.
Absolutely.
So again, this applies to taxes, but it applies to so many other things. If you're writing a book, if you're doing a launch, if you're writing your dissertation, whatever, it's such great habits for us to get into as business owners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so then, as we were saying, the first step of beating procrastination is just get that checklist in place. Make that checklist and get that completely complete and clear what you need. Number two being, set yourself up for easy progress by identifying a very specific, very straightforward action against everything on that checklist that hasn't been completed and checked off yet. And the third step is just keep yourself going. And the way we keep ourselves going is that maybe every few days we review that checklist and we're looking for what's been checked off, what have we done something on, and now we need to update what the next step is because it hasn't been finished yet. And so as we refresh that list so it's current, so we now have, again, against everything that still hasn't been checked off, we know exactly what that next step is. And again, we also look for waiting for, okay, is it time to follow up on this thing I'm waiting for? Because sometimes, depends on the urgency, right? So it may have only been a couple of days since you made that phone call and left a voicemail. And so maybe it's not time to wait to reconnect, to follow up again. But if it's been a week or, you're uncomfortable, however long that is, then maybe you send a second email or you make another phone call. But so that's how you make sure that things don't get stuck in waiting, is you go back through and review those waiting fors on a regular basis and decide when the right time is to take another action. And so if we keep that list refreshed, we always have this great inventory of simple actions to keep ourselves moving forward. And so that third step of keeping it refreshed allows us to sort of rinse and repeat. So you just go through, find some actions, get them done, every few days refresh that list, and eventually you're going to run out of things to do.
Which is a great thing. Eventually it's done, right?
And eventually it's done. That's right. And, as I said, probably 10 minutes a day, especially if you start a little bit early, should be plenty of time to do that. If you are now, we're now like 2 or 2.5 weeks away, you might need 30 minutes a day, maybe less, just depending on how long that list is. But it shouldn't be this big overwhelming thing if you manage it in the right way.
I love this. This is so great. So this is what happens to me, Chris. I hear you teach this and I think, I want to do this about everything in my business. Like I want to stop everything. I want to cancel everything. I want to make a checklist for everything. I tend to get ADD kicks in and I'm like, I need this for everything. It's going to simplify everything. And so again, that feels really overwhelming. So I catch myself saying, okay, break it down. We're starting with sales school.
Right.
I'm actually going to make one of these for my taxes, but I can see how these just little checklists could be amazing for every aspect of my business. I'm like, I want to go now. I want to do this.
Yeah. It is. The reason it works is because, it's based on some really core principles of productivity. Right. And so, what I'm giving you how to exactly do it with your taxes. But as you say, the basic concepts work for just about anything you want to get done that matters to you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's so good.
So any other questions? I don't know if we had any comments on the Facebook video.
I don't see any comments yet, but Chris, this is so good. I'm going to put you on the spot. I would actually love to, this is supposed to just be for the Alumni Lounge, but I would actually love to, if you're willing to share this with the entire Authentic Selling community, I'd love to send it out in an email. I think it's fantastic. Would that be okay with you? If I
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's totally fine.
One of the things, I've got a question too, but is it about taxes?
Sure.
I'm almost embarrassed to ask it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because everybody.
Something embarrasses you, Kendrick? I'm shocked.
Yes, because people are going to be like, oh, yes, I've experienced this. But I'm one of those people, Chris, and again, I'm going to go ahead and apologize because everybody here's experienced it. But when people ask me a question, I'm like, I'll give the answer and then I'll think, oh, I have a resource for that. I'll send to you. Or, oh, I'll give you this. Or, oh, I'll do this.
Mm-hmm.
In the conversation, you probably already know where this is going. In the conversation, I think, yes, I've got that. That's easy to do. And then I forget to do it. And I end up dropping the ball. I'm sure I've done this with you, Chris. Sure, I'll send that to you. And then you have to send me an email, be like, hey, where are those 3 things you promised me? And it's not intentionally trying to drop the ball. And it's
of course not. Of course not, Kendrick.
But it's an area that I'm really trying to work on. One of the things I've started doing, Chris, is like when I say, let me send that to you, is I'll be like, stop, let me pull up the email and do it right now and send it to you so I know it's done. But you're not always in front of your computer, right?
Yeah.
So a really specific example, and then I'm going to let you talk, is this weekend, or last weekend, we had Authentic Selling Live here, and somebody asked for something, and I said, we've got a resource for that, and I forgot to send it afterwards, and it just hit me this morning, I haven't sent that, I need to send it. So, and it's difficult for me in the middle of teaching to, you know, a group of people to say, oh, let me stop and write that down here and get home with it and be sure to do it. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah. So I definitely understand that, you know, it's a little disruptive, especially if you're, you know, in a one-on-one conversation or if you're, you know, teaching a group. It's especially disruptive to like go to your email and send somebody a link or a document immediately. I don't recommend that.
Okay.
Occasionally that might be the appropriate thing to do, but usually that's not really necessary. Now, what I do recommend is that certainly in a one-on-one meeting and probably in just about any meeting, you know, you should be taking notes, right?
Okay.
And so now it looks a little bit different if you're, say, at the front of a room teaching versus, you know, sitting around a table or on a Zoom call. But say with a Zoom call or a meeting where you're just sitting around a table, then, you know, you should always be taking notes. You know, even if you're there, the level of notes you take just depends on the situation, but you should always have a way to take notes. And so when you take notes, then one of the things you write down is send document to this person. You might even like star it or something. But the important thing is that number one, you write it down. And I'm looking to see if I have one of those things on me. I don't think I have a notepad with my stuff. So number one is write it down, you know, because storing anything in your head is just a recipe for, number one, dropping the ball, and number two, stress.
Yeah.
Because there's actually a sort of a subconscious piece of you that doesn't let go of that and will remind you at really, really inopportune times, like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
like
Yes.
you want to be lying in bed 3 o'clock in the morning, being reminded by your subconscious that you forgot to send somebody an email is really not a recipe for, you know, highly calm and peaceful living.
No, it's not. I agree 100%. Yes.
So the key is really you just don't want to be anywhere at any time without the ability to somehow capture a commitment or a thought.
And then is it just discipline doing it? So like sometimes I will write it down.
It is a habit, but there's a second piece to this. I'll mention in a moment. There's a second piece to that, and so I would say that maybe if you're like at the front of a room teaching, again depending on how big that room is, you might have someone else taking notes for you. Possibly, I don't know if you had an assistant in the room or something, because in that case maybe it's easier to have somebody else take that note for you. But then the key is, what do you do with that note after the meeting? Okay. And so for me, and what I recommend is, you know, I recommend always using, if you're with paper, always using like tear off notepads, you know, not bound journals personally. I don't like bound journals for this kind of thing, because tear off notepads mean I can tear off that sheet of paper, I can throw it in a tray on my desk. And that tray has a very specific function, which is it is where I collect things that need more thinking and more review. Okay. And so whether it's a meeting or mail or whatever it is, I have that tray that's collecting that stuff, and every day or two, I need to go through that, and I need to figure out what have I committed to, or what do I need to commit to related to everything that's come through that tray. You know, it could be receipts, it could be business cards, it could be, and some of it's junk mail, you just throw it away. But you know, once if you get those meeting notes, and then, you know, if it may be a day or two later, but you go back through those notes, and then you will see, oh, I told this person I would send this thing, and now you can either do it immediately if it's really quick, or you can just put it on the list. However you manage all those things you manage, you just put that in your system to manage your tasks, and you do it at the appropriate time, but it doesn't get lost.
You know, it's like when I was a sales rep, I had an inbox on my desk. I was out of the office all the time, right? So when I was in the office, there was an inbox, and I would, my office days, you know, I would take care of what was in the inbox. I don't know why I didn't translate the two. It's amazing to me how the human brain works. That's absolutely brilliant. Okay, that's going to be my other project, is to try to start that. I'm going to get an inbox and do that. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm the world's worst at that, and it really makes you look really, it makes you look incompetent and like you're dropping the ball. And of course, that's never my intent. My intent is to be helpful and say, oh, I've got something that'll help you with that, and then
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
disappointing
absolutely.
people, which is not a way to create a raving fan, to use a Kendrickism.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Chris, this is absolutely brilliant. My mind is racing with other things that you could actually teach the authentic selling community, as well as in sales school. Like I have all kinds of ideas, just because our brains are very different. And I think they complement each other well, because I
Sure.
mean, you say one thing and I'm like, he's genius. He should win a Nobel Prize. He should be a Rhodes Scholar. You may be a Rhodes Scholar. I don't know.
I am definitely not a Rhodes Scholar.
So, how can people find you, Chris? How can they
Well,
learn more?
Yep. So actually, why don't I go ahead and give you the 3 bullet summary, and
Yeah.
then I'll give you kind of a little more information about that.
Okay.
So the way I would say it is the keys to success for this stress-free tax season are: number one, create that clear and complete checklist of everything you need, all those information, all those forms to get your taxes done. And the good news is, this is going to be a lot easier the second time you do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, decide on that next action for every single thing on the list. Go through that folder and check off the stuff you already got, and then figure out what needs to happen very specifically for everything on that list. And so then now you have a whole bunch of things you can do in 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, or whatever it is you need to allocate to get that thing done. And then the third thing is, go through and review that checklist regularly, and make sure it's actually up to date in terms of, okay, I did this piece, now what's the next step? Okay, put the next step on it, or put that next step into wherever you manage your tasks, and do those follow-ups on the things that you've been waiting for long enough that you feel like you need to follow up for. And eventually you keep doing that process, you will get to the end and you'll be ready for someone else to do your taxes, or you'll be ready to start filling out the forms yourself. So that's the keys to success for a stress-free tax season.
Thank you so much. This is so brilliant. So how can people find you?
Okay, so if you need to find me, you can, well, number one, you can tag me in Sales School Alumni. That's probably the easiest way to find me. Number two is you can go to my website, which is www.maxpotentialcoach.com.
I'll put it in here for people.
And you can actually email me, chris@maxpotentialcoach.com. And really that's, I don't have a huge footprint on the web right now, but I do have a Kendrick style website, so that's good.
Oh, you're funny. Here we go. I'll pop the link in Sales School for us as well. And yeah, there you go. Okay, great. And then anything else, Chris?
Yeah. So if you've just watched this and you are thinking, wow, that sounds really great, but I'd like a little extra help, I'm happy to do, I'm probably going to do maybe 10 free little mini sessions, again, Kendrick style mini sessions, about 15 minutes. If you have more specific questions, we can help you identify exactly what you need to get started on this process, because, time is ticking away. And so if you're interested in that, just email me, chris@maxpotentialcoach.com, and I guess I'll put that in the comments underneath the Facebook broadcast once we're done. And I think I'll just for now, I'll just say 10 slots, and we'll try and get those scheduled. I guess probably because of the deadlines, I think next week would probably be a good time to get those scheduled. So
yeah, I would agree. And you know what, Chris, I have a meeting with our accountant on Tuesday. So to do both taxes, we filed an extension for our corporate taxes. And then for this, so this is going to be super helpful. This is what I'll be doing this weekend. Super helpful. And then, but the cool thing is next year, the spreadsheet will make it so much easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would, if I could just say one thing to anybody watching, I tell you, there are a lot of skill sets that it takes to run a business that makes money, but there are only a few skill sets that are super important to run a business that has staying power, that really is around to be the kind of business that we all dream it's going to be, to give us the freedom that we want to have, to make the money that we want to make consistently over and over and over. And this is one of them. This is the difference between being a business owner and being a CEO. And you may think, like I have in the past, I've never necessarily wanted to be a CEO, but this is part of what comes with running a business. And as I said at the top of the hour, I've made mistakes here. I have not taken enough out for taxes. We made more money, and it's never fun to get a tax bill for $35,000 and think, oh crap, what am I going to do? I mean, you know, it's just not. So I would highly recommend that if you do one thing this year moving forward, you get on top of this. It is the difference between businesses that are around for a long time, you know, that make millions and millions of dollars, like Marie Forleo, and the businesses that are fly by night and a flash in the pan. This is where the rubber meets the road. Thanks, Chris, so much for doing this. I appreciate it more than I can tell you.
Well, thank you, Kendrick. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much. I believe in you and I believe in your business. You can do this. Get those taxes done.